What if everything you thought you knew about Prince Harry's dramatic exit from the royal family was wrong? What if it wasn't his idea at all, but the result of a carefully orchestrated plan? One that left him torn, regretful, and trapped between love and duty. Tonight, we peel back the polished curtain and expose the confession Harry has been too afraid to say until now. Meghan manipulated him into leaving the royal family. Think about that for a moment. The prince who once walked behind his mother's coffin, who swore to protect her legacy, who was born to serve crown and country, now admits he may have been pushed, not pulled, into abandoning everything. Doesn't that change everything you thought you knew? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, the narrative was clean. Harry wanted freedom. Meghan offered him an escape. They left the monarchy to live their happily ever after in California sunshine. But inside the palace walls, late at night, behind closed doors, Harry's doubts were loud, constant, and unshakable. And yet, he left anyway. Why? Because Meghan made him believe he had no other choice. Do you ever wonder how much influence one person can hold over another? How love can blur into persuasion, persuasion into pressure, and pressure into manipulation? That's the line Harry is finally drawing now. The truth is ready to reveal. But let's start at the beginning. Picture Harry in those final months before Megxit. He wasn't celebrating a new chapter. He was pacing corridors in Frogmore Cottage, second-guessing himself, staring at childhood portraits of Diana and asking out loud, "What would Mum want me to do?" The weight of 1,000 years of monarchy pressed down on him, while Meghan whispered freedom in his ear. The hook was irresistible. Escape the rigid institution, live life on his own terms, protect his wife from the cruelty of the press. But was that really his dream, or hers? Every time Harry hesitated, Meghan reframed it. Every time he voiced doubt, she told him he was being weak. Every time he considered staying, she painted a picture of betrayal, not of her, but of himself. That's how manipulation works, doesn't it? It doesn't scream. It doesn't shove. It slides in quietly, wrapping around your fears, until you can't tell where your own voice ends and another's begins. The public never saw those conversations. They only saw the Instagram smiles, the Netflix contracts, the speeches about independence. But Harry's truth, as is finally daring to admit, was messier. He feared losing his brother. He feared disappointing his grandmother. He feared the gaping hole that leaving the military, the crown, and his heritage would leave in his chest. But Meghan had one answer to every fear. They will never love you the way I love you. They will never protect you the way I protect you. With me, you can finally be free. And freedom sounded good, didn't it? But freedom has a price. Now let's pause here and ask, do you think Harry would have left on his own? Without Meghan's push, would he have truly turned his back on everything he was raised to be? Or would he have found a way to balance love and duty, family and freedom? These are the questions Harry is wrestling with now. The questions he wants the world to finally hear. The timing of this confession matters too. Why now? Because Harry's life in California hasn't been the fairy tale Meghan promised. The Netflix dream turned into a grind. The Hollywood spotlight exposed more fractures than it healed. Instead of privacy, they found themselves hounded more than ever. And instead of finding himself, Harry admits he lost himself. That's why this story matters in this moment. It's not just about gossip or scandal. It's about one of the most famous men in the world confessing that his biggest life decision may not have been his own. The irony is brutal. Harry left the monarchy to escape control. But in doing so, he may have surrendered control to someone else. You can feel the contradiction, can't you? He wanted peace, but found chaos. He wanted freedom, but feels trapped. He wanted truth, but lived in narratives someone else wrote for him. And here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Those who loved Harry most, William, Charles, even the Queen herself, warned him gently. They asked him to slow down. They told him marriage doesn't mean abandoning family. But every warning only strengthened Meghan's influence, because she spun those warnings as attacks. See? They don't respect us. They don't want us to be happy. They'll never accept me. And Harry, desperate not to repeat Diana's story, chose her side every time. Isn't it tragic? In trying to save Meghan from the fate of his mother, he may have lost himself in the process. Imagine being torn like that. On one side, the duty and legacy of centuries. On the other, the woman you love telling you she'll walk away if you don't choose her fully. Which would you choose? That's the choice Harry faced. And that's the choice he now admits wasn't really a choice at all. The confession is explosive, but it's not the end. It's the beginning of a chain reaction. If Harry speaks this truth publicly, what happens next? Does it destroy the fragile bridge between him and his family? Does it unravel Meghan's carefully built brand? Does it rewrite history itself? That's the cliffhanger we're standing on tonight. Because Harry's story isn't just about love or betrayal. It's about what happens when a man realizes the life he's living may not have been his decision at all. And what he reveals next could change everything. But here's the shocking part. Harry's doubts weren't just private whispers. There were moments, key moments, when he nearly walked back his decision. And what Meghan said in those moments might be the most chilling revelation of all. What if I told you that Prince Harry almost didn't leave the royal family at all? That there were moments, crucial moments, where he was ready to pull back, to call off the escape plan, to admit that his doubts were louder than Meghan's persuasion. Imagine how different history might look if he had listened to that voice inside him. This is where the cracks in the fairy tale first appeared. Harry wasn't storming out with his fists in the air, triumphant and confident. He was pacing, hesitating, agonizing. His heart told him one thing, his mind another. His bloodline screamed tradition, while his wife whispered freedom. Can you see the contradiction? Think back to those nights at Frogmore Cottage. The official story said the Sussexes were making plans, setting up meetings, coordinating with lawyers. But in reality, Harry was restless. He'd walk the halls like a ghost. He'd stare at his military medals and wonder if he was betraying his brothers in arms. He'd look at his wedding photos and ask himself if he had already gone too far. He confided in close friends that he wasn't sure. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted in hushed tones. He was terrified of breaking his grandmother's heart. He feared William would never forgive him. He feared Charles would see him as a lost cause. But here's the twist. Every doubt Harry voiced became another opportunity for Meghan to reframe the conversation. Why are you so afraid of your family? She asked. Don't you see? They've never supported us. They'll never accept me. If you stay, they'll crush us both. It's manipulative, isn't it? Not screaming, not demanding, but twisting love into obligation. So Harry found himself in a mental tug-of-war. One moment, he was telling friends he couldn't leave. The next, he was telling Meghan he'd follow her anywhere. The seesaw broke him down, night after night. And then came the moment no one talks about. A private dinner at Kensington Palace. William invited Harry in a last-ditch effort to keep him close. It wasn't cold or formal. It was brother to brother. William poured drinks. He spoke about Diana. He reminded Harry of their mother's sacrifice, of her hope that her boys would carry her legacy together. Mum would want you here, William said. Not in Hollywood. And for a brief moment, Harry wavered. He thought about Diana. He thought about the boys walking behind her coffin, united in grief. He thought about what it meant to be a Windsor. He almost said yes. He almost stayed. But then came Meghan's call later that night. Calm, firm, unyielding. They'll never let you be happy, Harry. They'll always see you as second best. You'll always be in William's shadow. If you stay, you'll resent me. And if you resent me, we're finished. What would you have done in that moment? Chosen family, or chosen love? Harry chose love. Or maybe he thought he did. But it didn't silence the doubts. In fact, the doubts only grew louder once the plan was in motion. Drafting the exit statement, negotiating with palace officials, facing the Queen, Harry dragged his feet every step of the way. Insiders described him as haunted. One aide said he looked like a man, being led into a storm he didn't want to face. Isn't it ironic? The man who publicly spoke about liberation privately felt like a prisoner. Here's the contradiction that makes this story so heartbreaking. Harry left for peace, but he couldn't find peace within himself. He told the world he wanted independence, but in private, he admitted he wasn't sure he wanted any of it. And Meghan knew it. She saw his hesitation. And instead of easing it, she tightened her grip. She told him, "We're a team. Don't let me down now." And Harry, desperate not to lose the woman he loved, pushed forward, even as every step away from the palace felt like a betrayal of his own heart. Ask yourself, have you ever made a decision not because you wanted to, but because you feared what would happen if you didn't? That's the cage Harry walked into. And it didn't stop there. Once the announcement was drafted, once the world was watching, Harry's doubts reached a breaking point. He nearly walked it back. On the night before the official Megxit statement was released, Harry sat alone in his study, staring at his phone. Should he call William? Should he tell his grandmother he wasn't ready? Should he stop the whole thing before it was too late? That was the moment Meghan walked in. Calm, smiling. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "It's too late to turn back now. They'll hate us forever if you do. Trust me, Harry, this is the only way." And that's when he signed his future away. But here's the shocking truth. Even after the announcement, even after the world knew, Harry still confessed to friends that he wasn't sure. "I don't know if I've done the right thing," he said. His voice cracked. He admitted he couldn't sleep. He admitted he felt sick. Does that sound like a man chasing freedom, or a man being carried away by someone else's vision? Harry's early doubts are the missing piece in the Megxit puzzle. They prove this wasn't a confident choice, it was a reluctant surrender. And the cracks we see today in his life in California, they started back then, in those sleepless nights, in those whispered conversations, in those almost decisions. But if you think those doubts were bad, wait until you hear about the tactics Meghan allegedly used to make sure he never backed out again. Because manipulation doesn't end at persuasion, it escalates. And what she did next would bind Harry's hands in ways he never expected. That part of the story is coming, but not yet. Because before we get there, we need to dive into how Meghan's persuasion worked like a strategy, a carefully laid out plan that left Harry feeling like he had no escape. And that's where we go next. What if persuasion isn't about shouting, but about whispering just the right words into someone's ear at the exact moment they are vulnerable? What if Meghan's influence on Harry wasn't random, but a strategy, subtle, calculated, and relentless? Tonight, we peel back the layers of her persuasion tactics, and you'll see how Harry's doubts were not silenced by reason, but reshaped by influence. Think about it. Harry wasn't some naive teenager. He was a grown man, a soldier, a prince who'd faced war zones and the press's relentless fire. But even strong men can be disarmed by love, can't they? Especially when that love feels like the one thing that protects you from a hostile world. Meghan knew this. She understood Harry's deepest wounds, his grief over Diana, his bitterness toward the tabloids, his resentment of being the spare. And she used them, not always maliciously, but strategically. Every time Harry hesitated, she framed his hesitation as proof that his family didn't value him. "They'll never see you as equal, Harry," she'd say. "But I do. I see the real you." Isn't that powerful? To be told that someone finally understands you, when you felt misunderstood all your life. Let's take it step by step. Harry's first big doubt came after one of his private meetings with palace officials. He came home tense, unsure. He told Meghan he thought maybe they should compromise, maybe step back a little, but not fully leave. Do you know what Meghan said? "Compromise means you lose, Harry. It means they win. Don't you want to show them you're stronger than that?" Notice the framing. She didn't argue the facts. She turned it into a battle. And Harry, raised in the military, trained to fight battles, couldn't walk away from that challenge. He didn't want to be seen as weak. Now imagine this playing out over and over again. Every doubt became a test of loyalty. Every hesitation became proof of strength or weakness. And Harry, desperate to prove his worth, chose Meghan's side each time. Here's another layer. Meghan also used the power of isolation. Have you noticed how quickly Harry's circle shrank after their marriage? Old army friends saw less of him. Palace aides who'd once been trusted were suddenly the enemy. Even William and Kate became outsiders in Meghan's narrative. "They don't want us happy," she'd insist. "They don't understand us." Doesn't that sound familiar? It's a classic tactic. Separate someone from the voices that might pull them back and amplify your own. But it wasn't just isolation. Meghan also leaned heavily on emotional timing. She knew when Harry was weakest. After a brutal headline, after a fight with William, after a snub from Charles. In those moments, she didn't argue policy or duty. She pressed her advantage with emotion. See? This is why we have to leave. This is why I need you to choose me. And Harry chose her. Again and again. Let's talk about the Hollywood dream she painted. Meghan used storytelling as persuasion. She sketched vivid images of their future together. A big California house, freedom to travel, lucrative deals, the chance to raise their children without cameras stalking them at school gates. She painted it like a movie script. Glamorous, independent, romantic. And Harry, weary from years of palace rigidity, found himself drawn to those images. Who wouldn't? Don't we all sometimes want to run away to a sunnier, freer life? This is where Harry's confession gains weight. When he admits Meghan manipulated him, he's not just saying she pushed him to leave the institution. He's saying she pushed him to sever ties with the people who loved him most. And here's the twist. Once that choice was made, there was no repairing it. William and Harry's relationship didn't just cool, it froze. Charles grew more distant. Kate stopped trying. Even the Queen, who adored Harry, accepted that he had chosen another path. Isn't it tragic? A family defined by history, now divided by one decision. But wait, there's something even more shocking. Because choosing Meghan over blood didn't just break Harry's family ties. It also tied him to a dream he never fully wanted. A dream Meghan painted in vivid colors. The California lifestyle, Hollywood connections, freedom from duty. And that dream, as Harry would later realize, came with cracks, contradictions, and regrets he could no longer ignore. And that leads us straight to the next chapter. Because once Harry chose Meghan over blood, he was locked into a path that would take him thousands of miles from the crown, from his roots, from everything he once knew. And the California dream he was promised, it wasn't what he thought. And that's where we go next. What if the dream you were promised turns into the very nightmare you tried to escape? What if the golden ticket out of the palace gates, the sunshine, the Hollywood connections, the freedom, wasn't freedom at all, but another cage? That's what Harry discovered when he stepped into Meghan's California dream. At first glance, it sparkled. Los Angeles palm trees, mansions with sprawling gardens, invitations from A-list celebrities who once seemed galaxies away from royal life. Meghan painted it like a fairy tale. They'd raise their children without paparazzi intrusions, build a media empire, and live happily ever after far from the cold rigidity of Buckingham Palace. It sounded irresistible. But here's the contradiction. The California dream promised peace, yet delivered pressure. It promised privacy, yet unleashed more publicity. It promised Harry a new identity, yet stripped away the one he'd always known. Let's break it down. When Harry first landed in Los Angeles, he was struck by the stark difference. No formal bowing, no curtsies, no palace protocols, just a world that revolved around networking, charm, and deals. Meghan thrived in that environment. She knew the rules of Hollywood, the subtleties of branding, the importance of who you sat next to at dinner. Harry, on the other hand, looked like a soldier parachuted into a film set. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone seemed to know the script except you? That's what Harry faced. And Meghan, she was the director, guiding him through every scene. Smile here, shake hands there, mention Invictus when you can, it'll play well. It was as if Harry had traded one performance, the royal role, for another. Here's where the emotional spike hits. Harry thought he was escaping duty. But in California, he found a new kind of duty, one he didn't sign up for. Brand deals, scripted interviews, staged photos. Instead of serving Queen and country, he was serving contracts and cameras. And the irony? He had less privacy in California than in Windsor. The paparazzi followed their every move. Neighbors leaked stories. Drones flew over their Montecito mansion. In Britain, the palace offered some shield, some control over coverage. In America, they were exposed, raw, and relentlessly chased. Imagine Harry's frustration. He gave up everything, his military roles, his family, his heritage, for privacy. And yet, When he took his son Archie for a walk in the park, photographers leapt from bushes. When Meghan went shopping, tabloids splashed her groceries across headlines. It wasn't the dream. It was chaos. But Meghan held firm. She told Harry this was temporary, that they had to push through, that the bigger picture was worth it. Netflix, Spotify, book deals, a global brand as the compassionate, modern royals. She painted the California dream as a mission, not just a lifestyle. And Harry, once again, pushed his doubts aside. Here's the contradiction that gnawed at him. In Britain, his service gave him identity. In California, his image gave him currency. He went from soldier to symbol, from prince to product. And while Meghan adapted seamlessly, Harry felt increasingly adrift. Do you see the irony? The very escape that was supposed to heal him left him emptier than before. Now let's add another emotional twist. Harry began missing the very things he once rejected. The military camaraderie, the disciplined routines, the royal traditions that once felt suffocating now seemed comforting in memory. He longed for those crisp uniforms, those moments of purpose. And yet, he couldn't go back. Because every time he voiced regret, Meghan doubled down. We're building something better, Harry. Don't look back. But he did look back, in quiet moments. When the children were asleep, he'd scroll through old photos of him and William in uniform, of Diana's legacy events, of the Queen smiling proudly beside him. He'd ask himself, had he really traded honor for happiness? Or had he been sold an illusion? And here's where the California dream began to crack. The Hollywood circles Meghan promised weren't always welcoming. Some saw her as ambitious, others as calculating. Deals fell through. Friends drifted. The Spotify contract ended abruptly. Netflix grew frustrated with delays. And Harry, instead of feeling liberated, felt humiliated. He admitted to close confidants, I thought this would be different. I thought we'd be respected. But respect in California wasn't built on titles. It was built on relevance. And relevance meant constant exposure. Interviews, documentaries, memoirs. Harry, who once despised the tabloids, was now selling his story to the highest bidder. Doesn't that sound like the ultimate contradiction? The prince who hated media intrusion became dependent on media attention. But the California dream didn't just affect Harry. It seeped into his marriage. Meghan thrived in the spotlight. Harry resented it. Meghan wanted bigger deals. Harry wanted quieter days. Meghan saw opportunity. Harry saw emptiness. Arguments flared. Insiders whispered about late-night fights, Harry storming out, Meghan accusing him of being ungrateful. He told her he missed his family. She told him his family never truly loved him. And the wedge grew wider. But here's the emotional gut punch. Harry still believed leaving had been for love. He still clung to the idea that choosing Meghan was choosing happiness. He didn't want to admit, even to himself, that the dream she promised was unraveling. Because admitting that would mean admitting he'd sacrificed everything for nothing. So he pressed on, gritting his teeth, smiling for cameras, while inside he crumbled. And yet, the cracks became impossible to hide. Public appearances turned awkward. Smiles looked forced. Jokes fell flat. Even in glossy interviews, Harry's eyes seemed heavy, his words hesitant. He was living a dream, but not his own. And that's the heart of this chapter. The California dream wasn't freedom. It was another performance. Another cage. Another stage where Harry played a role he never auditioned for. But here's the shocking cliffhanger. Harry's doubts about California weren't just internal. They spilled over into a specific deal. A moment where everything Meghan had promised, the wealth, the power, the independence, collapsed in front of them. But here's the shocking cliffhanger. Harry's doubts about California weren't just internal. They spilled over into a specific deal. A moment where everything Meghan had promised, the wealth, the power, the independence, collapsed in front of them. And that collapse made Harry finally question not just the dream, but Meghan's vision itself. And that's where we go next. What if the very titles Harry and Meghan claimed they didn't need turned out to be the cornerstone of every deal, every handshake, every Hollywood promise? What if the escape from royal duty didn't free Harry at all, but tied him even tighter to a trap built on the one thing he thought he had left behind, his name? That's the heart of the California contradiction. The Sussexes wanted independence, but independence didn't pay. What paid were the titles, the connections, the royal mystique. Without Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Meghan were just another celebrity couple in an overcrowded Los Angeles. With the titles, they were gold. Think about Netflix. The platform didn't pay them $100 million for their cooking skills or directing talent. They paid for access, for prestige, for the royal glow that still clung to Harry like a shadow. Meghan's pitch wasn't "we're talented filmmakers." It was "we're the exiled royals who dare to tell all." That's what sold. And here's the irony. Harry had walked away from the monarchy to be his own man. Yet in California, he discovered he was more dependent on the monarchy than ever before. Imagine the tension that created inside him. Every time Meghan pushed a new deal, Spotify, Netflix, book contracts, Harry felt the pressure. Smile, share, sell your pain, package your trauma for millions of strangers. It wasn't just storytelling. It was monetizing his wounds. And Harry hated it. He confessed to friends that he felt like a commodity. "I'm not a product," he reportedly said. "I'm a person." But to Hollywood, he was a brand. And Meghan was the manager. Have you ever felt like you were being used for what you represent, not who you are? That's what Harry was living. Let's dive into one of the most telling moments, the Netflix documentary. Cameras followed them into their Montecito mansion, into personal moments, into what Harry thought were private conversations. The entire production leaned heavily on their royal narrative. The tension with William, the coldness from Charles, the racism Meghan claimed she faced. Every frame was marketed not as Harry and Meghan, private citizens, but as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, rebels against the crown. Harry cringed. Insiders whispered that he hated reliving family drama on camera. But Meghan saw it as necessary. "This is our truth," she said. "This is how we control the narrative." But was it really truth, or just another performance? Here's the contradiction that stings. Harry claimed he left to protect his family's privacy. Yet the Netflix cameras exposed them more than ever before. Their children appeared on screen. Their marriage was dissected in close-ups. Their pain was broadcast to millions. So why did Harry agree? Because he felt trapped. Without the deals, there was no income. Without the income, there was no California dream. And without the dream, Meghan's promises crumbled. It's what I call the titles trap. They didn't want the monarchy, but they couldn't escape its value. Meghan understood that perfectly. She leveraged their titles in every negotiation. She insisted on being introduced as Duchess. She signed contracts under Sussex. She built a brand on the very institution she claimed to despise. And Harry, he knew it. He admitted privately that the whole setup felt hypocritical. "We can't slam the monarchy with one hand and cash in on it with the other," he told a confidant. But Meghan countered, "We're not cashing in. We're reclaiming what's ours." Do you see the manipulation in that framing? Turning profit into empowerment. Turning hypocrisy into justice. And Harry, once again, silenced his doubts. But the cracks showed. When Spotify abruptly ended their partnership, it wasn't because of talent. It was because the Sussex brand was losing shine. Netflix grew restless too, cutting projects, demanding more raw content. Suddenly, the California dream didn't look like freedom. It looked like dependency. And dependency is exactly what Harry thought he had escaped. Imagine the pressure building inside him. He gave up his military roles, his royal duties, his relationship with his family, only to find himself chained to a Hollywood system that saw him as nothing more than Prince Harry, son of Diana, brother of William. Not Harry the man, not Harry the soldier, not Harry the father, just the title. It must have burned. Here's where the emotional spikes turn raw. Behind the glossy deals were fights. Meghan demanding he do more press. Harry pushing back, saying he didn't want to sell his family pain anymore. Meghan accusing him of being ungrateful. Harry snapping that he missed his brother, missed his life, missed himself. These weren't just marital arguments. They were existential battles. And here's the kicker. Harry admitted to one friend, "I feel like I left one cage for another." The California dream had become a gilded trap. But wait, there's more. Because just as the Netflix deal began to wobble, the palace stirred. Quietly, discussions began about stripping Harry and Meghan of their Sussex titles altogether. If that happened, everything Meghan had built, the brand, the deals, the leverage, would collapse overnight. And Harry, for the first time, realized the full cost of his decision. If the titles disappeared, so did the dream. So did the income. So did the very thing he gave everything up for. And that looming threat brought Harry's doubts to a boiling point. Because if Meghan had manipulated him into leaving for a dream built on titles, what happened when those titles were gone? That's the cliffhanger. Because the cracks in Hollywood weren't just personal, they were existential. And what happened next would tear the curtain off their carefully crafted image, exposing the fights, the regrets, and the truth Harry could no longer ignore. And that's where we go next. What if the smiles you see on camera are nothing more than masks hiding a storm behind closed doors? What if the perfect photos, the staged red carpets, and the interviews full of polished words were covering up nights of shouting, slammed doors, and tears? That's exactly what insiders whisper about Harry and Meghan. Their marriage was polished in public, but in private, it was combustible. This is where the story turns raw. The contradictions between what we saw and what was real become impossible to ignore. Harry and Meghan posed as the picture of unity, but those who got close enough saw cracks. Cracks that widened as the pressures of California life and their mounting deals collided with Harry's regrets. Imagine it, a Montecito mansion with marble floors and manicured lawns. The cameras captured glowing smiles in their Netflix special, Archie's giggles, Meghan's soft glances, Harry's chuckles. But once the lights went out, reality set in. Arguments erupted over money, titles, family, and the relentless demand to keep producing content to stay relevant. Have you ever seen someone laugh in public, only to realize later that their laughter was forced, almost rehearsed? That was Harry. He played the role. He smiled when Meghan needed him to. But inside, he was sinking. Here's how the pattern unfolded. Harry would raise doubts about the family they left behind, about the relentless media strategy, about whether selling their pain was worth it. Meghan would snap back, reframing his doubts as weakness. Do you want to crawl back to them? Do you want to prove them right, that you can't survive without them? She'd say. It was the same manipulation we saw before, only now it was sharper, more desperate. Because the California dream was wobbling, and Meghan couldn't afford cracks in the united front. Let's talk about one of the most explosive moments, the Oprah interview. To the world, it was a bombshell, a couple exposing royal cruelty, racism, and betrayal. But behind the scenes, it was a result of weeks of fighting. Harry didn't want to go that far. He worried about burning every bridge with William, Charles, even the Queen. He told Meghan, "We'll never get them back if we do this." But Meghan insisted. She saw it as their opportunity to seize the narrative, to cement their brand as rebels and victims. If we don't speak, they'll keep defining us, she said. The fight reportedly dragged on for days. Harry sulked in silence. Meghan pressed harder. In the end, he gave in. On camera, they sat united. But after the cameras stopped rolling, Harry admitted privately to a friend, "I think we've gone too far." Do you see the irony? The interview meant to liberate them, chain them tighter to the very narrative Harry wanted to escape. And that wasn't the only fight. Insiders described late nights when Harry stormed out of rooms, slamming doors, only to return hours later, quiet and defeated. Meghan, cold and firm, reminded him of what was at stake. "We've built too much to throw it away now." Public smiles, private fights, and the children? Archie and Lilibet became props in these battles. Meghan insisted they appear in carefully curated moments to soften their image. Harry resisted, saying he didn't want them in the spotlight. Another fight, another compromise Harry resented. But here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Meghan would sometimes accuse Harry of not being grateful. "I gave up everything for you," she'd say. "I walked away from Hollywood, my friends, my career, and you still want to run back to them." The guilt crushed him. Harry already carried the weight of leaving his family. Now he carried the burden of feeling like he was failing Meghan, too. Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle where every attempt to express your feelings only makes things worse? That's the cage Harry was in. And yet, in public, they smiled. At charity galas, at red carpets, at award ceremonies, they stood hand in hand, the united couple. Meghan dazzling in designer gowns, Harry in sharp suits. Cameras flashed, headlines gushed, but the truth, hidden behind those smiles, was far darker. Friends who visited Montecito whispered that the tension was palpable. You could feel it in the way Harry avoided eye contact, in the way Meghan controlled conversations. One guest reportedly said, "It felt like he was walking on eggshells in his own home." Isn't that chilling? A prince, born to command, reduced to tiptoeing around his own wife. But it wasn't just personal. These private fights bled into their business. Missed deadlines, canceled projects, rumors of Meghan pushing too hard, Harry pulling too soft. Netflix grew frustrated. Spotify cut ties. And behind every professional setback was another domestic explosion. Yet, no matter how bitter the fights got, the smiles never slipped in public. That's the cruelest part. Harry wasn't just fighting his wife. He was fighting himself, forced to live a double life, resentful in private, cheerful in public. And here's the twist that stings. Harry knew people suspected. He knew the world was beginning to see the cracks. And still, he kept smiling, because admitting the truth meant admitting he had been manipulated from the start. But the storm behind those smiles couldn't stay hidden forever. Because one night, one fight, would escalate to a point where Harry himself admitted he didn't know if his marriage could survive it. And that is where we go next. Every man has a breaking point. Even a prince. Even Harry. The question is, what happens when love, loyalty, and regret collide so violently that something inside finally snaps? That's where we are now. The storm of private fights, public smiles, endless deals, and constant manipulation had worn Harry down to the core. And one night, one argument, pushed him past the edge. Think about it. For years, Harry had been the happy-go-lucky royal, the one who cracked jokes at formal dinners, the one soldiers called just one of the lads in the trenches, the one the Queen adored for his warmth. But in California, that Harry began to disappear, piece by piece, smile by smile, and in his place grew a man full of doubt, regret, and quiet rage. The breaking point didn't come suddenly. It built like pressure in a sealed chamber. Small cracks forming, tiny leaks of frustration spilling out, until finally, boom. Let's rewind. The tension inside Montecito had reached unbearable levels. The Netflix fallout embarrassed them both. Meghan wanted more projects, bigger stages. Harry wanted less. He told her, "I don't want to keep selling our story." She snapped back, "Without it, we're nothing." The word stung. Nothing. Was that what he was now? Then came William. Harry reached out. Tentatively. Carefully. He sent a message to his brother, testing the waters. He wanted to talk, to rebuild something. William didn't bite. His response was polite, but cold. Walls were up. Trust was gone. And that rejection cut Harry deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. Because at the heart of it all, Harry wasn't just fighting Meghan. He was fighting the ghost of his family, the longing for what he left behind, the ache of knowing he may never stand beside his brother as a true equal again. Have you ever wanted to go home, but realized the door might be locked forever? That's what Harry felt. The breaking point came during an argument that started small. Meghan was furious about a deal falling through. She blamed Harry for not being enthusiastic enough during calls. "You look miserable," she accused. "You drag the energy down." Harry fired back. "Maybe I'm miserable because I never wanted this." The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan, stunned, asked, "What are you saying?" Harry's voice cracked. He shouted words he had never dared speak out loud before. "I regret leaving. I regret everything." Can you imagine the weight of those words? After years of defending their choices, after endless interviews framing their departure as liberation, here was Harry admitting, in the privacy of their mansion, that he wished he had stayed. Meghan exploded. She accused him of betrayal. She said he was weak, ungrateful, blind to what they had built. She reminded him of the racism, the headlines, the palace coldness. But Harry wasn't listening anymore. For the first time, he let himself feel the full flood of his own regret. He thought of the Queen, gone now, who never truly got to reconcile with him. He thought of his father, battling health rumors, leading alone. He thought of William, raising George, Charlotte, and Louis, carrying the burden of the future. He thought of Diana, watching from above, wondering if he had honored her or disgraced her. And Harry wept, not quiet tears, but heaving sobs, the kind that shake your body. He admitted he felt lost, empty, broken. He admitted he no longer recognized himself. That was a breaking point. But it wasn't just about regret. It was about realization. For years, he had told the world he was free. In that moment, he admitted to himself he was trapped. Do you see the tragic irony? He fled the monarchy because he felt suffocated. Yet in California, suffocation found him again, just in a different mask. From that night onward, something changed in Harry. Friends noticed he grew quieter, more withdrawn. Meghan noticed too. He stopped pushing back in arguments, but he also stopped believing in her vision. He moved like a ghost through their mansion, present, but absent, numb. And yet, he wasn't done breaking, because the world wasn't finished pressing down on him. The media pounced on their failures. Hollywood insiders mocked their fading relevance. Friends leaked whispers about tension in the marriage. Every headline was another blow, every rumor another cut. And then, the children became a new battlefield. Harry wanted them shielded, far from cameras. Meghan wanted them included, at least strategically, to soften their image. Another fight, another scar. But the deepest cut came from within. Harry admitted, during a late-night conversation with a close confidant, that he no longer knew who he was. I'm not a prince. I'm not a soldier. I'm not even a brother anymore. I'm just lost. Isn't that devastating? The boy who once carried the hopes of a grieving nation reduced to a man unsure of his own identity. And here's where the contradiction twists the knife. Harry's breaking point wasn't just about Meghan. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about realizing that no matter what he chose, family or freedom, he was destined to lose something. His crown, his brother, his peace, his self. That realization broke him more than any fight ever could. But wait, what came next would escalate the fracture even further. Because when a man reaches his breaking point, one of two things happens. He either collapses completely, or he begins to fight back. And Harry, for the first time, considered doing the unthinkable, telling the truth. Not Meghan's truth, not the Netflix truth, his truth. And that's where we go next. What if the deepest cracks in Harry's new life weren't about Hollywood deals or family feuds, but about his children? What if the very legacy he claimed to protect by leaving the monarchy became the battlefield that tore him apart inside? Archie and Lilibet, their names, their futures, their place in history. They weren't just kids anymore in the public's eyes. They were symbols, pawns in a tug-of-war between legacy and privacy. And Harry, already broken, was caught in the middle. From the start, Harry told the world he left to shield his children. He painted vivid images of Diana hounded by paparazzi and swore Archie and Lilibet would never endure the same fate. Privacy was the anthem. Independence was the chorus. But behind the scenes, the question loomed. How do you raise royal children outside the crown? Can you erase centuries of tradition with a single decision? Imagine the contradiction. On one hand, Harry wanted his kids to grow up in California's sunshine, running barefoot in Montecito Gardens, untouched by royal expectations. On the other, he knew their bloodline carried weight that couldn't be ignored. They were Diana's grandchildren, Charles's lineage, William's niece and nephew. No matter where they lived, they were royal. And Meghan, she saw the children differently. To her, Archie and Lilibet weren't just innocent kids. They were part of the brand. Carefully curated cameos in documentaries, fleeting glimpses in interviews, soft-focus moments designed to humanize their image. She believed their children could be both protected and powerful, used strategically to win hearts without being fully exposed. But Harry resisted. He hated seeing Archie's face on screens. He bristled when Meghan suggested they release a family photo for publicity. He told her, "I don't want them to be part of this circus." Meghan countered, "They're already in it, Harry. Better we control the narrative than let the tabloids do it for us." Isn't that chilling? The very thing Harry swore to avoid, his children becoming tabloid fodder, was now being repackaged as narrative control. Let's rewind to one of the most emotional confrontations. Harry sat at his desk late one night, scrolling through old footage of himself and William as boys, chasing each other in Kensington Palace Gardens while Diana watched with pride. He thought of how much the world adored those images. He thought of how much Diana had hated the intrusion. And he whispered to himself, "I don't want this for them." But Meghan walked in and saw the screen. "That's exactly why we have to get ahead of it," she argued. "The world will never leave them alone. At least this way, we can choose what they see." Do you see the contradiction? Protecting the children by exposing them on her terms. And then came the title question. After the Queen's passing, the debate over Archie and Lilibet's titles reignited. Should they be prince and princess? Did Harry want them to be? Meghan pushed hard. She argued it was their birthright, their shield, their proof of belonging. Harry wavered. He didn't want them burdened by royal expectations, yet he knew stripping them of titles meant severing their legacy completely. Have you ever been torn between giving your children roots and wings? That was Harry's torment. The irony? He'd left the crown to escape its weight, but now fought to secure its benefits for his kids. A contradiction so sharp it nearly broke him again. Insiders whispered that this became one of their fiercest battles. Meghan reportedly told Harry, if they don't get titles, they'll be treated as less than. Do you want Diana's grandchildren to be looked down on? Harry countered, I don't want them to have the same chains I had. Privacy versus legacy. Freedom versus belonging. The debate tore at the very heart of their marriage. But here's the emotional gut punch. Harry confessed to a friend that he feared his children would grow up resenting him. What if they ask me one day why they don't know their cousins? Why they don't see their grandfather? What do I tell them? Isn't that haunting? The man who wanted to protect his kids now feared they would see him as the one who cut them off. And Meghan's answer only deepened the fracture. She told Harry, you tell them you saved them. But Harry didn't believe it anymore. He saw the children not as saved, but as caught in a war they never chose. Then came the moment that shook him most. At a charity event, Harry overheard a reporter ask bluntly, will your kids ever know what it means to be royal? Or are they just American celebrities now? The question pierced him. He smiled for the cameras, but inside, the doubt roared. What were Archie and Lilibet? Really? Royals? Americans? Or pawns in a failed dream? That night, he admitted to Meghan, I don't know who they're supposed to be. Her response was chilling in its certainty. They'll be exactly who we tell them to be. And that's when Harry realized the truth. He hadn't just lost control of his life. He was losing control of his children's future, too. But here's the cliffhanger. Harry's doubts over the children didn't stay private. They spilled into his conversations with friends, with staff, even with distant family members. And one conversation, one confession, would blow the lid off everything. Because when Harry admitted his regrets about his children's future, it wasn't just Meghan who heard. Someone else did. And that person would use it against him. And that's where we go next. What if the truth you've been burying finally slips out? Not in a speech, not in a book, not in front of cameras, but in the quiet company of friends. What if the confession you swore you'd never make leaks out in whispers over late-night drinks, and suddenly, your deepest regret is no longer just your secret? That's what happened to Prince Harry. For months, he had been carrying the weight of his choices, leaving his family, burning bridges, raising his children in exile. He smiled in public, fought in private, but the regret simmered beneath it all. And like boiling water, it couldn't stay contained forever. Eventually, it spilled over. Picture it, a small gathering, away from the flashing cameras. Old friends from Harry's military days. Men who had fought beside him in Afghanistan. Men who had seen him at his most raw, his most human. These weren't Hollywood producers or Montecito neighbors. These were brothers in arms. The kind of friends who could look him in the eye and see past the mask. And that night, After a few drinks loosened his tongue, Harry cracked. "I don't know if I've done the right thing," he admitted quietly. "I left everything I knew, and I don't even recognize myself anymore." The words hung heavy in the room. These were men who had known him as Captain Wales, not as the Duke of Sussex. They remembered the soldier who found purpose in service, not the man selling stories on Netflix. One of them asked bluntly, "Do you regret leaving?" Harry paused. His head dropped, and then he whispered the word he had been choking on for years: "Yes." Can you imagine that moment? A prince, once so sure, now confessing he had doubts. Not to Meghan, not to the world, but to friends who would hold his truth like a fragile secret. But here's where it gets complicated. Secrets don't stay secrets forever. One of those friends, concerned for Harry, later confided in someone else. And like a crack in a dam, the story began to seep. Whispers spread. Harry regrets leaving. Harry feels manipulated. Harry wants to go back. Isn't it ironic? The man who spent years controlling the narrative through carefully staged interviews had his most honest confession leak through the very thing he despised most: gossip. But let's go deeper. This wasn't just about regret. It was about the reasons behind it. Harry admitted to his friends that he missed his brother more than he could explain. "We fought," he said, "but he's still my brother. I thought we'd always have each other." He missed his father too, despite the disappointment and distance. He missed the Queen, though by then she was gone, and reconciliation was impossible. And then came the most gut-wrenching part. Harry admitted he feared he had made his children's lives harder, not easier. "I thought I was protecting them," he said. "But what if I've just made them outsiders?" The friends listened, silent, as Harry poured out what Meghan would never let him say publicly. He admitted he felt cornered during their decision to leave. He admitted Meghan had pushed harder than he was comfortable with. He admitted he felt like he was living someone else's dream. And here's the contradiction that makes this so powerful. Harry left because he wanted to control his life. Yet here he was, confessing that his life felt more out of control than ever. One of his friends, blunt as ever, told him, "Mate, if you don't speak your truth, you'll drown in hairs." That line hit Harry like a thunderclap, because that was the truth he had been avoiding. Every time he spoke in public, it was Meghan's script, Meghan's narrative, Meghan's truth. But his truth, the raw, conflicted, regretful truth, remained buried. Until now. And yet, here's the twist. The very act of confessing made him vulnerable. Once the whispers began, the palace caught wind. The press sniffed around. And Meghan found out too. Imagine her fury. For years, she had worked to project unity, to paint their decision as bold, brave, and necessary. And now, Harry had gone and admitted, even in private, that he regretted it all. To her, that wasn't just weakness, it was betrayal. Have you ever spoken a truth in private, only to realize it could destroy everything if it got out? That's the cliff Harry was standing on. Because now, the confession wasn't just between friends. It was out there, circling, waiting to erupt. And Meghan, determined to protect their image, demanded answers. The fight that followed wasn't just another argument. It was the beginning of the most dangerous fracture yet, the split between Meghan's truth and Harry's. And once that fracture opened, there was no way to close it again. But here's the shocking part. Meghan didn't just confront him privately. She began laying the groundwork publicly, crafting a counter-narrative that painted Harry's doubts as nothing more than stress, exhaustion, or media lies. And that brings us straight into the next chapter. Because Meghan's counter-narrative wasn't just defense, it was offense. She was preparing to bury Harry's confession before it ever reached the light of day. And that's where we go next. What if the person you trusted most not only dismissed your confession, but turned it into a weapon to protect their own story? That's exactly what Meghan did when whispers of Harry's regret began to slip beyond the walls of Montecito. She didn't panic. She didn't crumble. She acted. Because Meghan understood something Harry didn't. Narratives win wars. And in their war against the monarchy, against the tabloids, even against their own crumbling image, she knew she couldn't afford cracks in the story they had carefully crafted. So when Harry admitted in private that he regretted leaving, Meghan's response wasn't sympathy. It was strategy. She began to weave a counter-narrative, a version of events where Harry's doubts weren't betrayal, but simply exhaustion. Not a crisis, but a phase. Not regret, but proof of how much the system had broken him. Do you see the brilliance? By reframing his confession, she turned his truth into her ammunition. Let's walk through it. Behind closed doors, Meghan confronted Harry with icy calm. If you tell people you regret leaving, do you know what that does? She asked. It makes you look weak. It makes me look manipulative. It makes us look like liars. Do you want that? Harry, caught in the web of guilt, froze. He tried to explain. He wasn't attacking her. He was just speaking his heart. But Meghan wasn't interested in his heart. She was interested in the story, and she was already rewriting it. The next time they appeared in public, Meghan leaned harder than ever into their united front. Smiles wider, hands held tighter, her voice steady, insisting in interviews that they had no regrets. We made the right decision, she declared. We're free, we're happy, we're thriving. Harry sat beside her, nodding, even as his eyes betrayed him. Have you ever seen someone smiling while their soul screams the opposite? That's what Harry looked like. But Meghan's counter-narrative didn't stop at interviews. She began planting lines in friendly outlets. Anonymous sources close to Meghan emphasized how Harry was adjusting well, how he was happier outside the monarchy, how any suggestion otherwise was tabloid spin. It was a masterclass in narrative control. Bury the truth under layers of polished messaging. So Harry found himself in a mental tug-of-war. One moment, he was telling friends he couldn't leave. The next, he was telling Meghan he'd follow her anywhere. The seesaw broke him down, night after night. And then came the moment no one talks about. A private dinner at Kensington Palace. William invited Harry in a last-ditch effort to keep him close. It wasn't cold or formal. It was brother to brother. William poured drinks. He spoke about Diana. He reminded Harry of their mother's sacrifice, of her hope that her boys would carry her legacy together. Mum would want you here, William said. Not in Hollywood. And for a brief moment, Harry wavered. He thought about Diana. He thought about the boys walking behind her coffin, united in grief. He thought about what it meant to be a Windsor. He almost said yes. He almost stayed. But then came Meghan's call later that night. Calm, firm, unyielding. They'll never let you be happy, Harry. They'll always see you as second best. You'll always be in William's shadow. If you stay, you'll resent me. And if you resent me, we're finished. What would you have done in that moment? Chosen family or chosen love? Harry chose love. Or maybe he thought he did. But it didn't silence the doubts. In fact, the doubts only grew louder once the plan was in motion. Drafting the exit statement, negotiating with palace officials, facing the Queen, Harry dragged his feet every step of the way. Insiders described him as haunted. One aide said he looked like a man, being led into a storm he didn't want to face. Isn't it ironic? The man who publicly spoke about liberation privately felt like a prisoner. Here's the contradiction that makes this story so heartbreaking. Harry left for peace, but he couldn't find peace within himself. He told the world he wanted independence, but in private, he admitted he wasn't sure he wanted any of it. And Meghan knew it. She saw his hesitation, and instead of easing it, she tightened her grip. She told him, "We're a team. Don't let me down now." And Harry, desperate not to lose the woman he loved, pushed forward, even as every step away from the palace felt like a betrayal of his own heart. Ask yourself, have you ever made a decision not because you wanted to, but because you feared what would happen if you didn't? That's the cage Harry walked into. And it didn't stop there. Once the announcement was drafted, once the world was watching, Harry's doubts reached a breaking point. He nearly walked it back. On the night before the official Megxit statement was released, Harry sat alone in his study, staring at his phone. Should he call William? Should he tell his grandmother he wasn't ready? Should he stop the whole thing before it was too late? That was the moment Meghan walked in. Calm, smiling. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "It's too late to turn back now. They'll hate us forever if you do. Trust me, Harry, this is the only way." And that's when he signed his future away. But here's the shocking truth. Even after the announcement, even after the world knew, Harry still confessed to friends that he wasn't sure. "I don't know if I've done the right thing," he said. His voice cracked. He admitted he couldn't sleep. He admitted he felt sick. Does that sound like a man chasing freedom, or a man being carried away by someone else's vision? Harry's early doubts are the missing piece in the Megxit puzzle. They prove this wasn't a confident choice, it was a reluctant surrender. And the cracks we see today in his life in California, they started back then, in those sleepless nights, in those whispered conversations, in those almost decisions. But if you think those doubts were bad, wait until you hear about the tactics Meghan allegedly used to make sure he never backed out again. Because manipulation doesn't end at persuasion, it escalates. And what she did next would bind Harry's hands in ways he never expected. That part of the story is coming, but not yet. Because before we get there, we need to dive into how Meghan's persuasion worked like a strategy, a carefully laid out plan that left Harry feeling like he had no escape. And that's where we go next. What if persuasion isn't about shouting, but about whispering just the right words into someone's ear at the exact moment they are vulnerable? What if Meghan's influence on Harry wasn't random, but a strategy, subtle, calculated, and relentless? Tonight, we peel back the layers of her persuasion tactics, and you'll see how Harry's doubts were not silenced by reason, but reshaped by influence. Think about it. Harry wasn't some naive teenager. He was a grown man, a soldier, a prince who'd faced war zones and the press's relentless fire. But even strong men can be disarmed by love, can't they? Especially when that love feels like the one thing that protects you from a hostile world. Meghan knew this. She understood Harry's deepest wounds, his grief over Diana, his bitterness toward the tabloids, his resentment of being the spare. And she used them, not always maliciously, but strategically. Every time Harry hesitated, she framed his hesitation as proof that his family didn't value him. "They'll never see you as equal, Harry," she'd say. "But I do. I see the real you." Isn't that powerful? To be told that someone finally understands you, when you felt misunderstood all your life. Let's take it step by step. Harry's first big doubt came after one of his private meetings with palace officials. He came home tense, unsure. He told Meghan he thought maybe they should compromise, maybe step back a little, but not fully leave. Do you know what Meghan said? "Compromise means you lose, Harry. It means they win. Don't you want to show them you're stronger than that?" Notice the framing. She didn't argue the facts. She turned it into a battle. And Harry, raised in the military, trained to fight battles, couldn't walk away from that challenge. He didn't want to be seen as weak. Now imagine this playing out over and over again. Every doubt became a test of loyalty. Every hesitation became proof of strength or weakness. And Harry, desperate to prove his worth, chose Meghan's side each time. Here's another layer. Meghan also used the power of isolation. Have you noticed how quickly Harry's circle shrank after their marriage? Old army friends saw less of him. Palace aides who'd once been trusted were suddenly the enemy. Even William and Kate became outsiders in Meghan's narrative. "They don't want us happy," she'd insist. "They don't understand us." Doesn't that sound familiar? It's a classic tactic. Separate someone from the voices that might pull them back and amplify your own. But it wasn't just isolation. Meghan also leaned heavily on emotional timing. She knew when Harry was weakest. After a brutal headline, after a fight with William, after a snub from Charles. In those moments, she didn't argue policy or duty. She pressed her advantage with emotion. "See? This is why we have to leave. This is why I need you to choose me." And Harry chose her. Again and again. Let's talk about the Hollywood dream she painted. Meghan used storytelling as persuasion. She sketched vivid images of their future together. A big California house, freedom to travel, lucrative deals, the chance to raise their children without cameras stalking them at school gates. She painted it like a movie script. Glamorous, independent, romantic, and Harry, weary from years of palace rigidity.